So I think we are live. Let me check as always once again if we are really live, but I think so. Let me check here. Yes, we are live. We are live. Guys, before we kickstart this here, please, I see a lot of people in the chat already. Please let us know if our microphone is working all right, if the camera is working properly. Sometimes we don't recognize this here in the streaming room. And yeah, I'm streaming in from Medellin. Cosmos is around the corner, so it's a different setup here. So it might be something wrong here, so please let me know. But now, as we have so many excited people in the chat, today we will talk about liquid staking. The liquid staking wars have officially started on Cosmos. We have seen so many new projects coming to the interchain that focus on liquid staking, such as Stride, such as pStake, but also some older projects such as Lido. With that said, I welcome my guests, Mikhil, Valerie, and Vishal. How are you doing, guys?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I'm doing great as well. Thank you, Yuri.
Nice. Mikhil, I think we had you on the show actually before, so no introduction needed. I think we recorded a podcast a couple of months before. So Valerie, if you want to start to introduce yourself briefly, I think this would be super useful. And then Vishal, maybe you want to take it from there.
So hi, everyone. Really nice to be here today. So I'm Val. I'm from Lido. Yes, I'm on kind of like everything kind of go-to-market team.
Vishal?
Hey, everyone. Yeah, I'm Vishal. I'm from Stride, one of the co-founders of Stride. We are primarily liquid staking to Cosmos.
Nice. Yeah, let's keep it very brief. Really like that. But now let's start the conversation about liquid staking. So I think let's start a little bit from a broader perspective. So maybe Valerie, you want to start to talk a little bit about why we actually need liquid staking, because as of now we have this problem with the unbonding period, but people want to use their assets even though they are staked a little bit more flexible. So is liquid staking actually just something that emerged because of user demand, or were there also more reasons behind that?
So that's a good question. So liquid staking, it's actually every single kind of like proof of stake blockchain, let's say, has different reasons why it's relevant. And the TLDR onto why liquid staking is important is because it's really the foundation of composable finance. So what we call kind of like, maybe a lot of you have heard about the DeFi Legos, which is kind of an analogy that is frequently discussed in Web3, where basically you can stack DeFi strategies on top of another. And tokenization of value and of assets and representing those through tokens enables kind of these new forms of derivatives and of assets, which is really, really interesting as users, but also for the protocol. Now, that's for the user, from the user perspective. From the protocol perspective, the reason why it's important is that basically what liquid staking enables you to do is that it makes proof of stake staking. It makes it a lot more simple and straightforward, where the user can just interact with a liquid staking protocol directly to stake, versus kind of having to figure out all of the node operation requirements, all of the complexity around that, and understanding how to technically run a node, and also incurring the risks associated, let's say, with any kind of forms of slashing on proof of stake blockchains or anything like that. And often the interfaces are a lot easier to use. But the other piece is also in regards to, there's complexity, but there's also the opportunity cost, where often when you stake on a proof of stake blockchain, you need to lock up your assets. And as many DeFi users know, there's an opportunity cost to doing that, because why would, for example, stake my Atom on chain for a certain amount of yield if I can get even more yield in another DeFi protocol? And so when you think about it that way, you're thinking, okay, well, the incentive technically would be to bring your atom or your native asset to DeFi because you would earn more yield. But that's a problem because in decentralized proof of stake systems, you need more people to stake in order to ensure decentralization, which ensures the security of the network. And so that is fundamental to any proof of stake system, is that you need them to be decentralized, to be efficient, and also to be secure. So it's like, how do you find a way to reduce the opportunity cost and to reduce the complexity to basically allow more people to stake and make it super, super accessible, super simple, super straightforward, so that it's decentralized and secure. So liquid staking enables you to do that. It's that like it enables you to stake, but without the complexity and without the opportunity costs. So basically, do you want me to go a little bit into how liquid staking works, or is that something that you think the audience understands really well?
Yeah, we will actually go deeper into this in the next part. So now we just wanted to talk about why it matters and where the demand basically came from, because it's very, very important to mention here once again that Cosmos has this unbonding period, and this is like clearly an opportunity cost. So that's a pity for many users and an argument to do liquid staking. But now I would be like curious to ask you, Mikhil. So I mean, now that we understand why liquid staking is important, now we have these liquid staking protocols that allow us to do liquid staking. But what do the onboarding what does the onboarding process actually look like? So let's say you want to onboard a new asset to pStake. What would the procedure look like? So what needs to be done?
No, that's a good question. So adding on to what Val said, maybe just one more point. I think actually asked whether it's demand or it's something else that which is why we are all looking at liquid staking. I think the key proposition is that liquid staking has a clear product market fit, not in Cosmos yet, but in other ecosystems. There's not many applications in the Cosmos ecosystem yet, but we see so many being built. So it is kind of like anticipating that demand early on and building towards it. And the reason why we've been big on Cosmos for the longest time is that we believe the ecosystem is going to be super big. And to answer your question around like how the onboarding process looks like, it's actually quite tricky because number one, I think Cosmos ecosystem has the most amount of like knowledgeable users on staking, because staking has been something which came out of Cosmos, to be honest, right? It wasn't something that is prominent in other ecosystems. Maybe Tezos was the only one when Cosmos came out with the chain launched and all those things. So people in Cosmos understand staking really well. And right now the yields are actually much better than what they used to be. There was like 7% at a point in time. There's about 10%, 14%, but right now it's 17 point some percent, which is a great number. So to onboard users to liquid staking, what you really need is sustainable DeFi yields going forward, which in the bear market is obviously very tough to build. So the number one thing to do after you build a liquid staking protocol is to like bootstrap liquidity for your asset. Otherwise it just is not possible for you to onboard any users, because the slippage on just moving out of your ST atom or STK atom or another ST atom, which is Lido's atom, it's just too difficult, right? So bootstrapping that liquidity and then quickly building those use cases for your liquid staked asset would be the key to onboarding users. And in addition to that, the one thing that I think Quicksilver has done really, really well is educating users about what staking is, what liquid staking is. And that has been like super helpful to the Cosmos ecosystem, right? Because every time you go to Twitter, you see a Quicksilver thread about something ICA, ICQ, how it all ties in, which is phenomenal. So a lot more education about staking and explaining the risks of staking, because lately we've seen some slashing events, a double signing event and on one Cosmos chain, not maybe the Cosmos hub itself, but we are only now looking at those risks, because people were not even concerned about double slashing any time in the past, but now they are looking at it. So explaining those risks, and then the risks that liquid staking adds on, mitigating those risks as much as possible by maybe some security audits, bug bounties, and whatnot. But I think the key is to build those use cases, without which you won't be able to bootstrap a liquid staking protocol.
Yeah, and we will also dive into these risks also in a minute. But yeah, Vishal, I think now it's like very interesting to know because Stride is like the youngest project in this round. So how are you actually tackling this problem that Mikhil just mentioned in regards of ensuring to attract as much liquidity as possible, to attract as many users as possible, and also what the procedure looks like in order to onboard new assets? Is it like completely permissionless? So let's say you want to offer a staked Osmo and then you just do it, or do you have to do a governance proposal on Osmosis, or what does this look like?
Yeah, I'll get a question. So I'll start with the last question and I'll go forward. So in terms of onboarding, purely permissionless, we do require one kind of thing from the host zone, which is that they have IPC v3, which allows for interchain accounts. I think this is mostly true of every liquid staking provider that's their own app chain. Basically, interchain accounts lets you pretend as if you were an account on the host chain. So like Osmo, for example, lets the Stride chain open up like a Stride account on Osmosis, and then Stride chain can issue commands there. So without that, liquid staking doesn't really work. So we require that on the host chain. I believe Osmo is almost enabled ICA, but there's one additional step we need to do. I think it should be enabled next 20 weeks, and then we can onboard Osmosis. But it requires just a vote on Stride to be like, do we want to onboard this chain? There's technically it's very easy. It's probably like the gut vote that passes it, and then maybe like 30 minutes to an hour of UI work on our end to add it to our front end site. That's about it. The other thing we'll probably going to do when we onboard new chains is kind of just the first part of your question is it's not that useful to have a liquid staking derivative on a chain like Osmosis if there's not much liquidity. So if I can't go sell my SG Osmo or whatever the derivative is, it's not really very liquid anymore. So we also will likely like just bootstrap a little bit of liquidity into like Stosmo Osmo pool. But that's about it. It's very quick, very easy to onboard new chains. Doesn't really require much permission. I think it's true of all the liquid staking providers that are here today. Is it's mainly also highly scalable because you are your own app chain. You can deploy to basically hundreds or thousands of chains depending on the exact implementation. So yeah, it's very easy to scale. In terms of what we're doing to onboard new users and like how the interface looks, yeah. So the goal with Stride is to try to be as simple of a UX as possible and try to really onboard as many users as possible. But like Mikhil and Val have done a great job talking about, there's a ton of demand for liquid staking. We want to kind of help users access that. Definitely understanding that it's somewhat new product and there's not a ton of education on the space yet. So we're trying to make it a little bit easy, trying to walk users through the flow. You go on the Stride Zone site right now, it kind of walks through the whole thing. Basically, you have your assets on Atom, you send them to Stride, you liquid stake, get the assets back, deploy them on Osmosis. That's right around the full cycle. In terms of liquidity, also, it's something we care a lot about. Again, like the protocol is not that useful if you can liquidly sell out of your tokens. So we have done a lot of work to try to get liquidity onto onto the Statum Atom pool, and we're going to do the same amount of work to get onto the other pools. We've devoted quite a bit of resources and tokens to incentivizing the initial liquidity. The idea here being, if your liquidity is like kind of low, it's hard to get over this activation threshold. Where if you're not over this threshold, people can't really go in and out of your token, of the Statum token, and so it's not that useful. But once you get enough depth and liquidity, people can start building additional products on top of Statum. Then we think it's like much more self-propelling. So some examples are people start building lending markets on top of Statum, which again relies on deep liquidity on that first layer. People start using Statum as a collateral for stablecoins. Also starts building natural usage. There's all sorts of DeFi products built on top of liquid staking coins. And so we just want to really are heavily incentivizing this pool to make sure we get over that initial activation energy. And we're already starting to see people talk to us about adoption. So hopefully it's working. And yeah, the pool has a good amount of usage now. I think it's the 7th or 8th pool on Osmosis.
Oh, that's very impressive, and also because you're still like in such an early stage. But now, as we understand now how to onboard new assets and how the procedure in the background looks like, I think now let's like start a little bit about talking about the differences between all of you guys, from different aspects on, like, for example, how do you guys ensure decentralization? How do you ensure that people can keep their governance rights if that's possible, and so on. So let's start with the most crucial aspect, maybe decentralization. So well, I know that on Ethereum this would be like very different, so let's stick to the Cosmos example. Let's say I want to liquid stake Atom on Lido. I deposit my Atom and I do liquid staking. What happens then? Are you choosing a validator for me? Are you just choosing a handful of validators? So what is happening there?
Yeah, so it's actually a really, really good point. To bring up the fact that the way that Lido works on Cosmos is actually really different from the way that it's designed on Ethereum. And actually, Lido as a DAO, the way that it works, the way that it's built, the smart contracts are built on the different protocols are actually like different units that kind of like are a part of those networks and those communities. So they're different, like technical and also just like in terms of community considerations that go into the design of the way that the smart contracts work. So in terms of like user onboarding, anyone can use like Lido. Like you can, if you're a user, eventually when it goes live, you literally one-click staking, you go to the interface, you're a user, you click stake, and then you receive a liquid token in return that then you can go and use in DeFi. So it just goes straight into your wallet. You don't have to worry about it. Your Atom is staked on chain. And what happens in the background is that the staked Atom that you get basically gets distributed to the node operators that are part of the node operators of Lido's set. Now, that's a bit different from the others where like you don't choose a single node operator and you don't, also we don't choose for you. It's kind of like distributed. The reason for that is that there's this kind of like a single point of failure risk where that's something that we want to mitigate. It's not always the case, but it's really hard to kind of quantify like the risk related to that, because yes, there's risk that it can be dishonest, but even if the node operator is super honest, like maybe the infrastructure can go down for a little bit. And then if they get slashed, like that's your user funds. Like as much as you would want everyone to be a node operator, you want to say, okay, well, I don't want to be the one who puts my funds with this one in particular, you know? So for us, like security is really, really important. So there's definitely, in the way that it's done in Ethereum right now, because the beacon chain, you can't do any withdrawals. We have to be a little bit more extra careful with the selection process, because if the user is stuck, with there's a bad validator or something, like it's locked. So we have to be more like progressive in terms of like the opening it up and making it more permissionless and all of that. On Cosmos, it's actually different. And we're trying out something that is a new design where we kind of want to really promote and support a little bit, accelerate the process of decentralization in a way that, we kind of get both. So what we're doing is actually there will be two sets of node operators. So one of the set will be like basically whitelisted, which is similar to the Ethereum process. And so the whitelisting process for the vetted and the whitelisted node operators are going to be both on-chain and off-chain criteria. So what that means is, like, for example, like there are things that you can quantify, like on-chain, which are like, okay, do they have good uptime? Do they participate in voting? Are they online? Everything like that. But off-chain parameters are things like reputation, or like, who are they as an entity? Do we trust them as people? Like things like that you can't really see, unfortunately, just like online. So that's kind of like the set that will be a little bit more, like experienced and expertise. And to run this kind of operation, they might get there's a difference in kind of like rewards as well that you get. And the second set is permissionless. So we're actually saying, okay, there's a permissionless set of node operators that are going to be vetted still, but they're going to be vetted by the DAO, but by only on-chain parameters. And there's the opportunity, though, that once you are in that set, let's say you don't have like all the reputation and everything to get whitelisted up front, there's a chance that you can transition from the permissionless set to the permission, like the whitelisted set, because potentially we hypothesize that there would be probably more demand to stake with the whitelisted set because of their reputation and potentially they're more secure. So, we would assume over time that they would want to kind of like migrate on that front. So that's kind of like how we're balancing decentralization and security to make sure that it's really like security first, but also that there's room to grow. And then over time, like we'll see kind of like how that evolves and the model evolves and where the demand is on also the staker side to like accommodate that so that anyone can stake easily, securely, and that is not a problem and doesn't hinder anything in adoption.
Yeah, I think it's like this is like a very, very small path here, very thin path here that you guys have to overcome. This where you basically have to see how can we combine decentralization and security. I know, like Mikhil, I think on pStake it works a little bit differently. So could you like explain like very briefly what you guys are doing, like in the example of Atom? Is it the case that I could choose the validator I want to liquid stake with, or are you deciding it, or are you also just distributing it? So how are you guys doing it?
Yeah, so on pStake, we will be deciding it in the beginning. It'll be a decently large set. It won't be a very small set. It won't be a very big set. I do agree with Val, where in the early stages you do need to be more careful with, and especially with the recent events in the Cosmos ecosystem, with a lot of validators getting slashed and so on and so forth. So we do want to be a little careful. And to be very honest, in my personal view, at this stage, I don't see a lot of demand from users to actually choose the validator they want to stake with, given all the positives and the negatives of it. So if you really think about it, I think there's a very big attack vector when you allow people to choose a validator of your choice, right? Because if I'm a validator, let's say I'm a malicious validator, what I would actually keep doing is I'll bring some Atom and I'll liquid stake it through the protocol that allows me to choose my own validator node. And then I'll just swap that liquid staked Atom for more Atom and keep doing this over and over again, jacking up my revenues through just running my node up, validator nodes. So that's kind of like an attack vector, which we haven't solved for yet. And until we do actually have a very solid solution for this, I don't think it's a very good idea to do this, because obviously the positive is that as a user you can choose your own validator, but the negative is much bigger, because if a validator is so like, if they really want to do this and jack up their revenues on the staking front, they will just keep doing this until the peg breaks. And even with a very liquid pool, there could be a scenario where the peg breaks and there's just cascading liquidations and all those things that are happening, because you're kind of incentivizing this behavior. So you really don't want to do this. So for us, we will be choosing a set of validators on our own, and then pStake token holders through governance can decide which validator should be on the set. On our front, we will be actually choosing a lot more smaller validators as well, validators that are not too big yet, because we do believe in decentralization, and that's kind of what we are all working for. So we will be choosing a few smaller validators who are not, who don't have a lot of voting power today, but have the potential to build a really world-class like institutional institutional staking operation scheme. So that's kind of what they want to do, what we want to do.
I actually want to add a comment to that, because I think it's an interesting point. And obviously, like, we're saying this, and this is our best hypothesis as like different teams that are working on this solution. And there's no, like, only the future will tell, what the right approach is to this, and like being a little bit slower might take the time. And the DAO kind of like, doing it through the DAO, involving the DAO, which Lido does, like pStake does, as you said as well, like to let decide is kind of an important thing. The one thing that I would say, I see someone in the chat saying like Quicksilver, for example, the unrestricted validator sets and everything like that. It's an interesting approach. And again, like we'll see how it goes. But from the team that was working at actually Lido on Terra in the past, which, by the way, I wasn't there at that time, so like I can't tell you guys about it. I can only tell from like the observation. But there was a big learning actually that came out of that, and maybe that's something that like I'm sharing with you guys. But and it's just that actually we realized that when we say, okay, like any user can choose the node operator, the validator, it's very tough to vet as a normal user, because like most people, it's not their full-time jobs. They don't really know how to like vet the node operators. So it's hard to do, like, how do you do your own research, you know? So basically it tends to lead to more centralization because people rely on others to vet and say, oh, well, there's more people staking with this one. Well, it must be a good one, so I'm going to stake with this one. And then basically it kind of tends towards like that one validator or, you know, node operator that might not necessarily be the most qualified. So it's kind of a trade-off to do, and you don't know what that node operator, that validator is doing in the background to incentivize people to, let's say, like put more money with them to like showcase from the outside that they're trustworthy. So it's like risk reward kind of scenario, but it's all things that we're figuring out.
I think to add to that, sorry, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
I will be brief. So to add to this, the biggest issue here is that maybe Lido or pStake token holders should be aligned with Cosmos Hub, Cosmos Atom holders. That's the only issue that I think if we can tackle as a whole, then this problem seems like a very small problem.
Yeah, but I really like this point of the discussion here. So Valerie, you basically kickstarted this argument by saying this form of centralization, so to say, that there's a protocol in between handling where the delegations are going to, is actually needed in order to ensure decentralization, because otherwise, like, people really under some circumstances do not really know what to do or which validator they want to choose. So do you believe we are in this in-between phase where we need some responsible protocols or some responsible persons to basically navigate decentralization into the right direction?
No, I think maybe I expressed myself wrong, because I don't think that, like, as a protocol, as a team, we have the responsibility to choose like who's right or who's wrong. I think there's actually objective ways in order to make sure like that the set of node operators is decentralized, and it takes time to like onboard and make sure that they're decentralized. So if I'm only speaking for Lido, for example, the way that the parameters are like the whitelisting process, let's say, for the whitelisted ones, not the permissionless set, some off-chain, for example, parameters that the DAO will evaluate is like, okay, geographic location, for example. So like, that's something that, okay, like if it was permissionless, the permissionless set, maybe a lot of people who follow Lido are from like Asia or from America, specifically in this part of, and there's regulation risks that differ. So maybe they'll need to like censor some transactions or something like that. And like people don't think about that, but maybe you're in a different jurisdiction, and then the basically you're at different risks. So there's like, that's like one example. Or servers, like what servers do they run on? Do they all run on the same server or the same infrastructure? Like that's also another centralization risk. So when you think about it, it's like, how do I onboard different validators that have different criteria, different characteristics, different properties, different positioning, to make sure that the overall map of them on these different spectrums are very varied, so that it minimizes single point of failure risk at any point in time. And the way to like basically, like how do you say, like choose, like select these ones are basically done like in a democratic way and all of that, and through the DAO. And I'm only speaking about the whitelisted set, by the way, not the permissionless set, because that's only on chain. But these are kind of like parameters that are more objective, that are not, just to make sure that it's like for the network. And in the case of Lido, you're not choosing to, stake with one. The Lido protocol, it's actually just a smart contracts that when you just do your one-click staking in the background, it will just split like your stake across all of them. So that even if one of them who's like super, super great, something happens to them, like it's still okay. So that's kind of the architecture behind it. So that's just to clarify.
Yeah, that's actually cool. I really like this because in that way, liquid staking like if I would choose like my validator right now, I have to stake 10 Osmo. For example, I would, if I'm really a decentralization king, I would distribute these 10 Osmo across 10 different validators. But most of the times I'm lazy, and most of the times I want to keep my text declaration simple, so I just choose one, and that's it. But if I would liquid stake it via Lido, for example, then my 10 Osmo would get distributed in a more decentralized manner, which is like actually cool. But what would I be? So I'm curious now, Vishal, because you're like again the youngest protocol in this round. Have you seen the demand from users choosing their own validators, and are you actually handling it in a very similar manner to Lido, or how are you doing it?
Yeah, great question. So I think we've seen. So one is high level. I think everyone would like the ability to choose a good validator, on their own and be able to get the rewards. But it trades off a lot of real world like trade-offs. And I think the net sum of these, mostly we've not seen users want this. A couple of things. One is like you have fair the slashing risk, which is hard. If you actually want to choose your own validator, like you truly get the rewards of your validator you choose. The tokens are no longer fungible. And so like you kind of lose all the benefit of liquid staking because now you just have one liquid staking token per each validator. Not super useful. And then third is the kind of attack vector Mikhil pointed out. We've also spent a lot of time thinking about this. I think it is really hard to overcome this attack vector, where basically if you allow like users to control the end distribution of validators, you get this problem where you have these really highly sophisticated validators or malicious players who can direct the flow of the weights. And so while it is like a nice ideal and there is probably some demand for it, I think the practical implementation is a little bit challenging. In terms of what Stride does, I think it's similar, slightly different, but not better or worse, just slightly different design decisions. So for us, we have one validator set. All the validators on like the host zone, like Atom or Osmo, are eligible for that set. And then it's the Stride governance chooses what the distribution of weights are. So for example, the governance might be like, I want to delegate to only the bottom 50 validators in the set to increase Nakamoto coefficient. That would happen immediately through a gov vote, and then the protocol would take that along. What we've done so far is we've been talking to Thiborg. He has been working on a pretty good set of validator rankings. I don't think it's quite finalized yet, but we're hoping to get it over the line pretty soon. And it's obviously up to the Stride governance, but that's going to be kind of the recommendation that we hope is going to be followed. I think there's a lot of things he's taking into account there that are hopefully good for the overall ecosystem. But ultimately, it is up to the governance. And there are different things people might want to choose. We're exploring down the line of kind of splitting up the token and having multiple different validator sets you could choose. Well, it's not like better or worse. There's just different trade-offs. And I think right now, given that we're so young, we don't have the liquidity to have two separate tokens. Because then you're kind of fragmented on the pools. We think at more higher scale, it's definitely more feasible and probably good for decentralization. For right now, when we launched this week, we chose around 30 validators. We excluded like the exchange validators, excluded some zero fee, high fee excluded high fee validators. But those just kind of get a sense of performance on the chain. Been a lot of tests on test nets, but just want to make sure on mainnet everything's gonna work great. Like one example of a technical problem just want to make sure was the gas limit per block when you do rebalances, and so far everything's looking good. So I think we're probably gonna expand to the full set pretty soon. But yeah, overall, really, I kind of leave it up to governance. Also, think there's an element here where a lot of users, I suspect, don't have like necessarily the time or interest to kind of to go pick what the optimal validator is. But there are some people who do a lot of research in this and care a lot and have thought really deeply, or almost like academics on validators. And then we think it's somewhat better to let these people kind of guide the discussion and kind of put up their thoughts for a vote and then have those be reflected in the underlying validator set. Last thing I would say is just, given that we have lots of different liquid staking protocols, that in of itself is kind of like a meta level, very good for decentralization on the validator layer, where if you have like, 4 or 5 different liquid staking protocols and all have slightly different ways of choosing validators, you might end up with an end distribution that's, quite healthy. And I think we all have very, very similar goals in approaching this and slightly different approaches. And hopefully the kind of mixture of all these approaches ends up achieving the goal.
I see. Yeah, and I what I clearly see here is I think there are like so many interesting developments right now, and I find it so cool to have you here, Vishal, now, because it basically gives us an insight where, for example, pStake and Lido were a couple of months or years ago, and now you basically see what challenges you have to overcome in the first place. It's a pity that Quicksilver is not here to maybe share some experiences as well. But my question now is, because we talked about this smart contract, Valerie, that basically distributes my, let's say, atom, for example, across different validators. Is there not also a certain risk of a smart contract hack? I mean, we have seen many smart contract hacks before. So let's say I could hack this smart contract and manipulate it in that way that I can delegate all the atoms that are going through the smart contract just to one single validator, and then gain a huge voting share on the chain, and then could also harm the decentralization on the chain itself. Is this maybe a little bit too much paranoia here, or is there some truth behind this risk?
I mean, it's always good to ask for risk in DeFi, I think. So I'm like super risk averse, everything like that. If I've learned one thing, it's like to for sure, like the protocol layer is one thing, the bridge layer is another, smart contract layer another. And it's very important to ask these questions. In terms of Lido, so as you guys know, like we have our smart contracts on Ethereum. And basically it's the largest liquid staking protocol. It's audited continuously. And the reality is it's DeFi, it's transparent code. So, there are like a lot of bounties. I think over 2 million has been paid out just in terms of bounties and things like that. So we do everything that is possible in order to make that happen. The people that I work with, I really admire them, because it's like, if I were like, obviously I'm biased because I'm inside. So I like, it's like, I speak with the people that are building it. And I like, of course, that kind of taints a little bit my trust towards the protocol and the DAO and the people that are handling it, and the people in the community that, govern on the decisions that are made for the protocol. So I would say, like anything else, perhaps, like you never know. But the measures that are currently in place, the smart contracts that are in place, are very robust. So in regards to that risk, I don't see why it would be more vulnerable than others. And I think, given the reliability of, on all other chains and the smart contract design there, it's among the most robust, I would say. So I'm not worried at all, but I would never say like, never. So yeah.
Yeah, never say never in DeFi, I would say. But yeah, as we are like now very deep into the decentralization aspect, let's push this conversation one step further in regards of governance rights. So if I'm staking Atom right now natively via my Kepler wallet, I still have my governance rights. But now my question is, what happens if I liquid stake these assets? Will I keep my governance rights, or is this different from protocol to protocol? Maybe Mikhil, you want to start what pStake is doing, and then I think Vishal, you can pick it up from there, because I know you have some interesting developments going on there.
Yeah. So as most people already know, when today, if you liquid stake your Atom, you give up your governance right. But I think everyone sitting here is probably working on a solution for this. So we are working on a solution where we can give STK Atom holders proxy governance rights, and so are Stride, and so is Quicksilver, Lido. Everyone is probably working on this. It's not that complex of a problem anymore to solve because of the developments in the Cosmos ecosystem lately. But when we launch, so we already have an STK Atom product live on Ethereum, which we have kind of already committed to migrating from and launching on the persistence chain. So similar to how Stride has its own chain, Quicksilver will have its own chain, Lido will launch on Newton. The pStake will issue STK Atom on the persistence chain and other STK assets within the Cosmos ecosystem. Initially, users will not have governance rights, but in subsequent versions, hopefully the first upgrade after that will have users will have governance proxy rights.
Happy to step in. Yeah, totally agree with Mikhil said. I'm sure we're all working on this, and so my guess for what the state of the teams are, or the state of Stride is, it's quite easy to do governance if you are fine leaving your assets in the host zone. So if you have like Statum and you leave that on Stride, it's not too hard to lock that up and say we're going to vote for this Statum. That ends up not being that useful. Like the goal of the liquid stake asset is not just to be sitting on Stride. You want it to go be deployed in DeFi. You want it to go be used as collateral in a stablecoin. You want to be able to use to support AMM. And so I think that's like the problem that I think like we're trying to solve right now. It's very doable. I think ICQ is starting to get to a point where this is mostly possible. The main challenge here, like kind of Mikhil said, is just you have this host zone that has the tokens. You want to query it from like a safe way, so you can go mirror that vote on your own zone. There's one additional point of complexity here, which is basically if you only do this query at one point in time, you allow people to basically run like a governance attack where they buy the token, vote, and then dump the token. And you don't really want these kind of people voting on chains often because they're maybe like opportunists, maybe they're like holding competitors' token and they are trying to do something fishy with this chain. There's all sorts of reasons you don't want people to vote who just hold the token for 2 or 3 blocks. And so what we really want to do is be able to snapshot the chain state at different points in time and be like, okay, this token was held in this location for a month or whatever long the unbonding period is for that host chain. So you don't really compromise on chain security on the voting layer. This is almost possible today, but not quite possible to standard chain queries. And there's a lot of work being done to kind of push this over the line. But that's kind of the last remaining piece of tech for kind of liquid governance or governance from SG assets. It's really done like a first class way. And so that's what we're working on. And we're hoping to push out very soon. My guess for how the first flavor of this will occur is you could vote on the Stride chain. So if your assets are on the Stride chain, very easy to vote. But also we're hoping to do if you vote, for example, in a Osmosis AMM, or if you have your assets in Osmosis AMM and they're locked up for a certain period of time, we also want to allow those votes to happen certain other areas. So we're still trying to figure out the exact locations that you could hold your assets to vote. The idea being we don't want to make it so people can kind of enter and exit and vote in that very short period of time. But it's something I think in the next couple months should be very possible technically.
Yeah, you ideally want to have assets locked up somewhere, the SDK or any derivative asset locked up somewhere to be able to allow this. And from our perspective, it need not be for like 21 days or 14 days, or it could just be for the last few days of the voting period where you as a user have certain benefits. So you are okay with voting on just the final few days of the governance proposal and doing that because it does not require a lot of locking up again, which is kind of the problem that liquid staking is trying to solve. But that's kind of what we are working towards as well. I think there was a very interesting discussion around Lido's Ethereum Ethereum implementation where they talked about ST-ETH being used as giving governance rights to ETH and aligning incentives ST-ETH holders. That was a quite interesting one, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean that's something that it's definitely important because of like I know we were going to talk a little bit about risks and about the whole conversation before about decentralization. There's the node operator level, but also kind of like governance level, which is important. For Lido on Cosmos though specifically, so that's why like for interchain queries and kind of like to enable interchain accounts and everything like that. We are building on Neutron, and so we're waiting for interchain security to be launched in order for that to go live, and then to go, live with Lido for Cosmos. So that's kind of like we're not going live yet, but for us that's kind of like not a trade-off that we want to do. We wanted to like kind of wait for the security aspect and the interchain queries to make it super efficient. To use and like robust on the long term. So so hopefully this comes through, interchain security gets launched beginning of 2023 so that we can start using it.
Yeah. Also, I mean, Mikhil, you just mentioned it. Like Lido will also launch on Neutron. So actually, do you have a roadmap for this in mind already, Valerie? Just out of curiosity, because we just talked about it. So in terms of the interchain, do you have like a roadmap and plan when you will launch on Neutron?
Yeah, so I mean, Neutron is waiting for interchain security to go through. So it will depend on the Cosmos ecosystem, essentially, like when that goes live. Once that goes live on Neutron, once Neutron goes live, then we, it's like it's ready to go. So let's see like where they get there. But I think it needs to be set up in place before we do anything. That's for sure.
I see. Yeah, I mean, we have to wait for interchain security. But yeah, I was hoping maybe you have like more insights than I do. I just want to pick up this question, if you don't mind, that just emerged in the chat here. I think many people are interested in that. Can I show it? Yes. Oh, no. Yeah. Here, if we liquid stake, will we be able to receive also future airdrops? I mean, airdrops is an omnipresent topic in the interchain. So yeah, what is the status here? If I'm staking Atom in a liquid staking manner, will I be able to receive an airdrop? Maybe that's also different from protocol to protocol.
No, if you please go on, Vishal.
No, go for it. Don't worry.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think it depends on the protocol majorly at the stage where the chain launching should be open to giving that airdrop to certain stake derivative asset holders, because it's really difficult, right? For most implementations, if you think about it, and for most liquid staking implementations, usually what happens is there's a host chain account through which assets get delegated to different validators, which means that the host chain account holds most of the atoms, which kind of makes it very difficult for you to, because all these airdrops come with all these parameters where there's a whale cap and all those 10 different things, which means that the account that will barely get any airdrop, right? Unless you could come up with an implementation where each user has its own dedicated account on the host chain. It's just impossible for the liquid staking protocol to distribute the airdrops. But if we work very collaboratively and closely with all the new chains launching, then it should be super easy to distribute these airdrops. And I think that is where we are headed because of so many liquid staking protocols coming out. It just is a no-brainer for any new chain to work with these protocols to distribute tokens to all Atom stakers, and especially because these are liquid staked Atom holders. It just makes more sense because they are more into DeFi than just stakers, right? So
yeah. And adding on to that, like, so of course it will depend on the protocols themselves, like if they will want to like work, with the to delegate essentially their airdrops to liquid staking asset holders. But when you think about it, like as a protocol, you want as like a protocol in Atom ecosystem, you want people to stake, but you also want them to be able to use DeFi. Let's say that they're a DeFi protocol. And the only way to do both is with liquid staking. So essentially, it would be kind of like this positive feedback loop in the ecosystem. If you say, actually, if you stake, but you have liquid assets that you can use on the DeFi protocol, then I can airdrop you tokens, because not only are you staking, but you also have assets that you can use to participate in DeFi. Whereas like that would not be the case if they were locked up. So like, from that perspective, it's an interesting to think about and a hypothesis on like where the future will go. But for example, you see like on Ethereum, which it has been like live for a little bit longer, where most of the assets are actually just liquid staking, because it just makes so much more sense as a user. Like, why would I not just earn extra yield in the background when I have assets that I can use in DeFi? So that's one way to kind of like think about it, where we don't know, but happy to work with them.
And Vishal, I think you wanted to add something to this as well.
Yeah. First, Val Mikhil did a really good job covering this. Totally agree. It really does depend a lot on the new protocol and whether or not how much they work with both team providers. But the one thing I'll say is I know there's a lot of kind of concern about this, about whether or not liquid staking tokens will be eligible for airdrops. And the current kind of regime of airdrops, I think it's a huge concern, because like virtually all the airdrops occur, or like stake drops, where they airdrop to stakers. I think it's very likely within like a year, we really stop seeing stake drops as being the predominant way to do airdrops, particularly if liquid staking becomes more prevalent. So imagine like a hypothetical future where 30 to 40% of Atom is liquid staked across like 4 or 5 providers. In that world, like even though 40% Atom are liquid staked, it might be like 70 or 80% of like used Atom are being liquid staked, that aren't just being held in like, you know, some cold storage or something. In that world, it's kind of doesn't make that much sense for a project to do a stake drop where they airdrop only the stakers. And I think what's much more likely is we're going to see airdrops kind of evolve to either, like Val said, be fully on like the DeFi layer. So you start airdropping to users of Osmosis or Crescent or other DeFi protocols, or you airdrop directly to liquid staking providers. So you're like, okay, I'm going to hold like P-Atom that they get airdropped to, or whatever it ends up being. But I think users should definitely be concerned about this in the short term, but in the medium to long run, I think it's going to be ultimately the detriment of projects if they continue to just do stake drops. So I think we'll see like smarter ways to do airdrops. And like we've already seen right now, stake drops aren't necessarily the most effective way to kind of get users or to get like people awareness. A lot of the stake drops are, as you know, just like sold immediately. A lot of them go unclaimed. Like a lot of these airdrops are 50% unclaimed. And I think as a community, we really haven't done a great job yet of trying to target, hey, this is a really effective way of, here's where my users are. Here's how I'm going to give them tokens, stream my tokens, here's where I'm going to start a project. And I'm hoping this is kind of just force that conversation forward a little bit, where people have to start thinking a bit deeper about how to do this. And it's definitely a hard problem. Like we at Stripe, we've not solved this problem, and I don't think any project has really done a good job of this. But it's time to, I think, start trying to do better.
Yes, I think there's always some room for improvement. But yeah, I find it like very interesting. I find it very interesting to know that it's basically something that the protocols have to decide by their own. So yeah, I'm also like curious how the protocols itself see this. So maybe some protocols are a little bit obsessed with the opinion and say, we don't want to support liquid staking at all. We want to prevent such a manner. So I think that's also interesting. But yeah, now I think to touch base on the last topic of this discussion, because the interview is getting longer. So Valerie, you and Lido, you have been very, very active from day one in regards of ETH 2.0, in regards of the merge. People were able to liquid stake their ETH already, and now we are entering a new era in the Ethereum ecosystem. So could you maybe talk a little bit about this? And also what I find like also very interesting here is maybe explain the difference to the different architecture to the Cosmos staking architecture. Your mic is off.
Yep.
Sorry, guys. So yes, I was going to say really briefly. So many of you probably heard about the merge. So essentially, Ethereum is changing consensus mechanisms, which is just basically how the node operators or the validators agree on the correct like state of the blockchain, and it's kind of like the game theory module that supports that to keep everyone honest. And so it's staking. It's like the cost of staking versus of like mining, which uses a lot of energy. And there's more to it than that, but TLDR, it's moving from proof of work to proof of stake. Now, what's interesting about Lido? Well, Lido, first of all, it was founded because of the way that the beacon chain was designed, of the flaws in kind of like the staking behind that, which we kind of talked about at the very, very early stages of this conversation. But the staking on Ethereum to run a node and everything, it requires you to have a minimum of 32 Ethereum, which if you think about at the height of the market was like 4,000 for Ethereum, which, you know, times 32 can get quite high for just a normal person. And then you need to run a node, so you need to understand how that works. You need to make sure that you're not offline, that it's still running. You have the risks of getting slashed. So it's not accessible to anyone, very complex. And then again, there's that opportunity cost that goes back into it. So we're thinking, okay, well, there's a lot of centralization risks regarding, you know, like exchanges that have the capital, like centralized exchanges that could just stake everything and then become like, you know, sole node operators in the system. And then so basically that was the first goal. It was with decentralization in mind to make it more accessible, simple, secure. So that's why Lido exists, essentially, is really, that was the solution to democratizing access to staking. So now that the merge is happening, So the fundamentals of Ethereum as an asset are changing. And that's really important because like as a staker, you're staking because potentially you might want to earn yield. So the yield that you're earning on your Ethereum potentially increases. The reason for that is that the rewards that used to go to miners now, like for validating, go back to the proof of stake chain, which essentially goes back to the stakers. So first of all, the yield on your Ethereum is changing and is increasing by quite a lot. So that's kind of like the first piece that we're excited about. Down the line, so right now the funds are still locked on the Beacon chain. That was a part of the whole merge process, is like in order to mitigate, like everyone kind of just, okay, after the merge goes live, like, everybody unstakes and then it becomes super dangerous and the network is no longer secure. Withdrawals are not enabled, and they're not going to be enabled right after the merge either. So it's actually, we're going to have to wait until another upgrade in order to wait for withdrawals to be possible. Now, what that means for Lido actually is that right now, because the funds are locked, we have a huge market share of the locked Ethereum. But once withdrawals are possible, as a staker, you can literally go in and out of the protocol and redeem your liquidity at any time. So that changes like a lot of things. That being said, like there are some benefits, for example, in terms of STETH, like every protocol, like for example, Lido has STETH as a liquid staking asset. And it's the most liquid and the most kind of integrated across DeFi. So as a DeFi user, there are benefits actually to having a liquid staking protocol that is more integrated and a little bit more dominant, just because it has more use and more liquidity. So the more and more, say like we were to divide that liquidity across liquid staking protocols, potentially that would reduce the utility of those tokens and the liquidity of those tokens. So that's it, like a trade-off. Now, of course, like someone in the chat said, like that will happen for the stake of decentralization. I think it's actually really healthy that the fact that like people will be able to withdraw and go from one to another, because like also for decentralization, and as we addressed earlier, also I think it was Vishal that said like all of the liquid staking protocols have different designs, and that's good because like basically they're like, if one design we figure out over time is more optimal than another, or one person prefers one to another, then that's also like, that's really, really cool. And as a user, like I like having that choice. So that will be cool. That means that Lido like will have to, keep delivering and stuff as a protocol. And then your second question was kind of like how it's different on the interchain. So the fundamentals of staking and the requirements for staking are just different. The bonding, unbonding periods, like the staking requirements, what it entails as a node operator is also different. And also your interactions, like the whole structure with interchain security, interchain accounts, the way that you'll interact with the protocol, and also the way that liquid staking protocols, the roles that they'll play in the Cosmos ecosystem in terms of DeFi. With interchain accounts moving from one dApp chain to another, and the composability of DeFi is also different. So it's a very different kind of like infrastructure and model that over time, like we'll have to see how it evolves, but completely different. I think like depending on the chain, depending on the proof of stake system, it's different requirements. So.
Yeah. Before the others add something to this super important topic, just want to let you guys know in the chat, if you have any questions now, please bring them up, because we are about to wrap this up as we are getting closer to an hour. So if there are any questions left, please let us know in the chat. But with all of this, what Valerie just mentioned, I know Mikhil, pStake is also working on onboarding more and more assets outside of the Cosmos ecosystem. We also know the differences to the Ethereum ecosystem. So in the Ethereum ecosystem, I'm not choosing one validator, so the architecture is very different. So how do you anticipate the liquid staking industry post merge?
I think it won't be too different from what it is right now, especially because decentralization is more of like long-term process. It's progressive decentralization that everyone is working towards. Until and unless I think withdrawals are enabled, we won't see a lot of change in the way people behave, especially like their choice of a liquid staking protocol. All those things might not change at all as of now, and because everybody wants to use the most liquid asset, which we all know is STETH, and that just makes sense from a user's perspective, because I wouldn't want to be holding an asset that is not very liquid. Although the fact that Rocket Pool has something very exciting being built, and that's a very positive sign. And like Vishal mentioned, there has to be different options for users and the space to evolve. But within other ecosystems, I see a lot more room for improvement in liquid staking, because all of these chains are still not that mature when it comes to the ecosystem, unlike Ethereum. But Ethereum, I think, will still see a dominant liquid staking protocol, and until and unless withdrawals are enabled, it'll still pretty much be the same. What will be exciting is to observe MEV on Ethereum, because I'm very much looking forward to that. I think there was a very interesting 37 minute read block by on Twitter that I recently went through. It's quite exciting, and like return seems really positive. So you should potentially look into that if you're looking to run a validator node on Ethereum. That's a pretty exciting thing. And how liquid staking protocols distribute this revenue to end users is something that we should look at for sure.
Is this actually something that you also have on your radar as of now, Vishal, in terms of MEV, which is also one of the hot topics as of now? So maybe are you like also considering the opportunity to opt into MEV protocols such as Mekatek or Skip in order to hand out a cut of the MEV that is being generated in the different networks to the fellow liquid staking stakers?
Yeah. So we it's very early days. Like my impression of these is that they're still doing well. We've talked to the Skip guys a little bit, and it's something that we talked about the technical design of this. And I think the way Skip is designed, the way Stride is designed, they're very compatible with each other. And so it should be possible theoretically to have like when Skip goes live, to be able to stream portion of that revenue to validators and in return like liquid like Stride Statum holders. There's also a nice aspect of MEV, which I think is going to help some other aspects of your chain, which is just like you have like you have a lot of function calls right now that I think are mostly being subsidized by teams like relayers, for example. And I think as we start seeing more MEV or more interchain happen, I think a lot of these things will get more automated and ultimately will help decentralization. And we're still looking pretty actively for how Stride can kind of play a part in this. But so far it seems pretty optimistic, and my impression is they're going to go live in the next like 6 months. And so we're hoping to be ready day one when they go live to start capturing our revenue.
That's cool. Yeah, excited for that. We actually got one question. I'm not too sure if one of you guys is able to answer it. It's about Babylon Chain. So their thoughts on Babylon and Bitcoin stamping. I actually had a very interesting conversation with CryptoCito about this yesterday, but I'm not too deep into this in order to answer this question. So has one of you guys an opinion on this for the fellow question asker?
I actually haven't dived much deeper into this yet, so I'll stay out of this one.
And I guess same for you guys.
Yeah, for the last 6 months, I've only thought about Stride all day. So I'm actually very much not qualified to comment about other ecosystems.
Yeah.
I would say the same, unfortunately. You would most likely have more insights than us, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, Ghazni, on it.
Yeah, and this sounds like we have to record another episode with Babylon as well. But I see there are no more questions left. With that being said, we are over the hour. So thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Vishal. Thank you, Mikhil. And I believe you guys can give them a follow on Twitter if you have any more questions. Dive deeper into their documentations. And yeah, thank you for joining, guys, and thank you guys for watching.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone.